Welcome to Conscious Confidence Radio, a timeless wisdom with Sarah Main. Follow host Sarah Main on her ongoing journey of conscious confidence and gain timeless wisdom to unleash unparalleled confidence. A conscious confidence. Learn to ignite the living spark of wisdom, a new narrative for fulfillment contained in Sanskrit and the ancient, powerful, engaging, and fun conscious conversations to discover your own magnificent true self. Learn to dispel the fear shadow as Sarah provides essential knowledge about embracing change and the power of transformation. Get ready, Conscious Confidence starts now.
Welcome everyone, welcome to you all, welcome to Conscious Confidence Radio. I'm your host Sarah Main, creator of Conscious Confidence, a Timeless Wisdom. And today's show is about stepping free of imaginary bondage. Yes, you heard it right. It's imaginary bondage. And all too often, the limits, this sort of limited feeling that we experience seems to be fixed and beyond our control. But actually, it's imaginary. And that's what the wisdom traditions are constantly reminding us about and reminding us how to step free of that. So we're going to take a deep dive into what this means. And the Sanskrit words for this show that I'm going to be referring to, the wisdom in those is manas, the mind, the active thinking center, the buddhi, the intellect, the discerning and discriminating center, and chitta, the heart, the feeling center, manas, buddhi, and chitta. And the wisdom traditions are very good on this. Remember, Sanskrit means pure and perfectly formed. So the wisdom in Sanskrit is pure and perfectly formed, and it's always spot on. So the manas, the active thinking center, the chatting mind, but it's also a magnificent servant, the buddhi, the intellect, the discerning and discriminating center, and chitta, the heart or the feeling center. So we need to just remember that when we go forward into into learning about how to step free from this imaginary bondage. So here's a story. This is today's story. And this is from the timeless wisdom traditions. So once there was a washerman, in Sanskrit it's a dhobi, and he used many donkeys to collect and deliver his loads of laundry every day. And one day he was unwell. So the washerman asked his son to take the donkeys out and do the pickup and the delivery of the loads of laundry to his customers. So his son loaded up the donkeys and then tried to move them. But they wouldn't move. They wouldn't budge an inch. They just stood there absolutely refusing to move. They just wouldn't move. And the young man had a look to see what the problem was. And he was surprised. He could see that the donkeys weren't tied up at all. They were just actually standing freely, but they wouldn't move. And he couldn't figure out why they just wouldn't move because they weren't tied up. So he went back into the house and asked his father why this was happening and what he should do. And the father said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, son. I forgot to mention that in the evening at the end of the day, I tap one hoof on each donkey as if I'm tying them up with a rope, as if I'm tying them up with a rope. And in the morning, I tap the same hoof again on each donkey so they believe I've untied them." So the son went back out to the donkeys and he tapped the hoof of each donkey and hey presto, they started to move. So the son was able to complete the day's work for his father. So there's a lot to learn. What does this story tell us? What's this story illustrating? Well, the donkeys felt they weren't free, so they couldn't move or wouldn't move until the idea was changed. So in the evening, tap, I'm tied up. Tap in the morning, I'm free to go. So once the belief was changed each day, they either moved or stayed fixed in one place. And it all rested on that trigger to the belief. So the only difference in the donkey's circumstances was an illusory belief, an imaginary belief. And this story is told by the wisdom traditions because it illustrates the usual human condition. We imagine that the limits that we feel are real and lasting. We keep repeating and believing the same limited ideas and belief systems in our mind each day. And this leaves us feeling weak and this sense of being bound by external circumstances. So the real issue of this freedom from this is being awake and aware, or being, or whether you're asleep and unaware. So being awake and aware on one hand, or being asleep and unaware on the other. So when we're in bed at night, we are unaware of things. When we're awake during the day, we're aware of things. Well, this is greater self-awareness. So it's daytime to ourselves rather than walking around during the day with our eyes open, and yet we're completely asleep, we're unaware. We want to choose, we want to be awake, and then we can see whether we're tapping our hooves and thinking that we're stuck, because it's all because of an imaginary belief. So by identifying the fake ropes that bind us, that seem to bind us, and by stepping free of them, we can feel completely free. And that's what conscious confidence is all about. It's about identifying where the imaginary ropes are and stepping free of them. Because you are, in truth, a limitless universal being. That's what the wisdom traditions are constantly reminding us. So we can experience our true strength and potential, and we have the opportunity to go free at every moment. And you can step free at any time. You just need to be aware. So what are these imaginary ropes that bind us? What are they made of? How can we untie ourselves and step free? Well, we do need to be present, awake, and aware. And that's Chaitana. In Sanskrit, Chaitana, be conscious, being intelligent, being understanding, being awake, aware, perceiving, and perceptive. Chaitana. If we're awake and aware, we can spot immediately where our limits are, where these fake ropes are. And this is what we become aware of. And these fake ropes are made up of things like negative and limiting self-talk, the inner speech that we have going on, and we're unaware of it. It's like we're in bed at night snoring away, and this is repeating in our mind. This is whilst we're going around doing our daily work. We can be completely unaware of this negative self-talk. So we need to become conscious of this. Chaitana, conscious. So this negative and limiting self-talk, this inner speech, is one of the classic fake ropes that binds us. Or, the tap on the hoof that we keep giving ourselves so we believe we're limited. And then there's limiting and negative external speech, and this can be judgmental speech, complaint, hasty speech that's out of our mouth, like interrupting, where we're not actually listening to the conversation, we're just shooting out these interruptions. This is all part of being unaware, asleep essentially. And so we want to bring all of that behavior, all of that speech, the inner speech and the external speech, the outer speech, into our conscious awareness, because then we can do something about it. And also the repetitive narratives and stories from the past that we continue to believe in our mind also form these imaginary bondages. Things like, I can't do this because every time I've tried before I failed. I'm not good at this because of some reason. I'm not smart enough because of something. They don't like me because of something. I couldn't possibly do this because I haven't, ... I'm just giving you all the themes that can just go on and on and on in our mind. Or the second we go to do something, these stories come up. And unless we spot them and see them for what they are, which is just imaginary limits, you won't be able to step free. And that's what conscious confidence is all about, is stepping free of that and living to your full potential with self-assurance. So here's some practical wisdom so you can try this out for yourself. And the practice is all important because this is where the transformation takes place. So we're going to focus in on speech because it's such a powerful thing. So this is a powerful practice to raise your self-awareness. And we're going to focus in on being aware of hasty speech. So choose one verbal habit that's out of your mouth before you're aware of it. Generally speaking, we've all got one, which is just a verbal habit that when we're not aware and awake in the present moment, it's out of our mouth before we realize it. And this could be a quick judgmental comment. It could be interrupting someone, and often the same person, or a complaint. These are just some examples. A quick judgmental comment can shoot out of your mouth, or interrupting someone, or a complaint. So Step one is choose just one of those. Just choose something that you're aware of. So firstly, you might have to become aware of the habit that you have, and then choose just one. So let's say it's complaint, okay? Then the next part of that is to resolve to stop the habit. So it's a resolution to stop the habit. It doesn't mean the habit won't reassert itself and you'll find the complaints coming out of your mouth. That's fine. You're working against habit, no problem. This is not a self-criticism exercise. Okay, so number one, choose a habit. Number two, resolve to stop the habit. Then number three, when you're aware of it happening, it's shot out of your mouth, right? Stop. And then if there's something new that can be said, say that. So when you're aware of it occurring, stop and wait 3 or 4 seconds. And this is either if it's come out of your mouth or if it hasn't. But let's say if you're aware that you're about to complain, if you catch yourself, stop. It doesn't mean repress it and stuff it down. Just stop, take a breath, wait 3 or 4 seconds. That's not a long time. That's 1, 2, 3. And then consciously decide whether to say it. So instead of it habitually shooting out of your mouth, actually make a conscious decision whether you're going to say it or not. And I would venture to say you're going to let that speech fall back. It creates a space, and then something more positive, something more uplifting may arise or will arise, and speak that. Give your voice to that. Give your tongue to that. And if you are now aware that this speech is negative and limiting, either to you or to a person you're speaking about, or about yourself or the situation, then just let all that speech fall back and wait for something positive to say. And after you've practiced that, it's a very powerful thing, because notice I'm not repressing speech. We're just letting it fall back and seeing if there's something more uplifting to say. After you've practiced that, get your journal out. After you practice that for a few days, get your journal out and make a note of how you feel. See if it's made a change. See if you feel a bit more awake and aware. And seeing if changing that negative speech to positive has changed actually how you feel and changed your energy. It's very, very powerful. So we're going to take a break, and after the break we've got the mailbag, and I'll tell you more about where to find some more about conscious confidence, and I'll sing you some Sanskrit. We'll see you soon.
A word of caution: if you prefer the status quo and you are not interested in improving every aspect of your life, this book will trigger the shift out of you. The Truth is Funny, Shift Happens is available now. Author Colette Steffen brings the powerful knowledge and life-changing energy and empowerment from the radio airwaves to the pages of her new book. To get your copy in paperback or ebook, visit thetruthисfunny.com today.
Inspire, create, empower. Only on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
This is Debbie Pokornik with a break-free parenting tip. If you haven't been practicing active listening or are getting into some bad habits, it's a good idea to go back to the basics and remind yourself how to be a good listener. Here's an idea that might help. When your child comes to you with a story about her day, set aside whatever you're doing and give her your full attention. If you're in the middle of something that can't be put aside, tell her that you really want to be able to give her story your full attention and ask if you could continue the conversation at a specific time. So for example, this sounds like an important story and I'd really like to give it my full attention. Can we talk about it in 10 minutes when supper's in the oven? Active listening might sound like common sense, but often it's these simple skills that get buried in our parenting pack and easily forgotten or overlooked. Challenge yourself to practice this skill for a full week and see if you notice a difference in how much your child is sharing.
For information and to work with Debbie, visit empoweringnrg.com.
Your inspiration all day on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
Have you heard the story of the snake and the rope?
One evening, a young woman was walking down a country road. It was growing dark. Suddenly she froze. Up ahead was a coiled snake. She was terrified. She reached into her bag for a flashlight and directed the beam of light towards the snake. Now she was flooded with relief. It was just a piece of old rope. That snake stands for all our imaginary fears and insecurities that sap our confidence. The beam of light is conscious confidence. Ask yourself, how many snakes did I see today? How many actions or words did I stifle through fear? Hi, I'm Sarah Main, creator of Conscious Confidence. Join me and my co-host, Dr. Pat, for Conscious Confidence Radio on transformationtalkradio.com. Learn more about how you can live a life filled with conscious confidence. Go to my website, consciousconfidence.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to Conscious Confidence Radio. And today's show is about stepping free of illusory bondage. Try and say that quickly. Illusory bondage. And it comes down to actually being awake and aware and being conscious of the negative things, the negative limits and bondages and limiting self-beliefs that we repeat in our mind all the time, because they're illusory. They're not actually there. We think about them, we think them into existence, and then we experience them. And because they're not really there, we have to keep repeating them, because if we stopped repeating them, they just dissolve because they're not actually there. So they take quite a lot of effort to keep going. That's often why we feel so stressed and tired, is because the repetition of these thoughts requires quite a lot of energy and effort. And if we just stopped that and came into the present moment and were conscious, we would notice a whole lot of energy is actually released, and we would feel quite calm and happy and peaceful in the present moment. And that's what we all crave. It's natural. And that's what we want to do. We want to come back into our natural state. And that's what conscious confidence is all about. So before the break, I was talking about practicing being aware of hasty speech. And so try that practice. I would thoroughly encourage you to do that. Catch any one habit that you have of negative, hasty speech that's out of your mouth. It could be this habit of complaining about something. Catch yourself. Resolve that you're not going to do that. You're going to stop it. And you do actually need that firm discipline, that decision. And then it's a case of practicing. And sure, there'll be days where it doesn't work as well, but that doesn't matter. You've made the decision and you just come back to that discipline again and again, and you will find a new habit will be formed where you become more aware of your speech. And when you're conscious of that habit of rising up to say a complaint, and it actually has a taste, that complaint has a taste in your mouth, and you'll become aware of that. And you'll prefer to speak something that's more positive, maybe praise someone, enjoy the environment and comment to someone how beautiful the day is, rather than complain about the fact that your foot is sore, or that you didn't like what someone just said to you, or your coffee was cold in the morning. Rather than complain, give praise. But you'll find that that habit starts to become more natural if you catch that hasty speech that's out of your mouth before you're aware of it. You'll become more aware, and then you can let that negative speech fall back and wait for a moment, and then let the positive speech rise. And if you start doing that, you'll be amazed at the transformation. And I would highly suggest that you get your journal out and journal the gains that you've made in relation to that, because it's very important to validate the growth and the positive, because we're very good at validating the negative and talking about that at length. But if we can validate the growth and actually praise ourselves and give ourselves credit for the progress and the growth and the gains that we've made, it reinforces that behavior and creates new habits, and that's so important. So over to the mailbag. It's time for your questions. Ask me anything. And I had a wonderful question from a man. He's a husband and a father. He's got 2 kids, a little boy and a little girl. And he was asking me about this. He said, what is the balance of practicality and spirituality, practicality versus spirituality. So the practical life on one hand, and then the so-called spiritual on the other. And he's taken to practicing meditation every day. He's trying to do that like 10 or 15 minutes every day and practice mindfulness. And he's journaling. So he's really trying to improve the quality of his life and the quality of his relationships with his wife and his family, and improve the efficiency of his work through some of these basic practices and disciplines that we can call spiritual, and I'm using those air quotes, spiritual, or personal development or self-development. But he then finds there's a disconnect between that practice and then when he has to go to work to the office and he's in front of a computer and on the phone and spreadsheets and all that kind of practical stuff, and he's got to play with the kids and help with the homework and help around the house and, you know, talk to his wife and all of that sort of stuff, all the usual, and walk the dog. He's got a little dog. So how do you balance that? And I would say, I think the interesting thing is that the mind presents the fact that these two things seem different, the practical life on one hand and this spiritual life on the other. It seems like that at first when you start practicing, but the more you go on, the more you practice, like that exercise of hasty speech or all these practices I give in the show. In every show I give you a practice. Try it. Really take this wisdom. Don't just take my word for it and hear it and say, oh, that sounds nice. Actually try it. You're not going to know until you try it. It's like a recipe book with beautiful photos and it looks fabulous. You're not going to know what that food tastes like unless you actually cook it and then actually eat it. You experience it. Then you'll know for yourself and you will then have the knowledge. So don't take my word for it. Take this timeless wisdom and put it into practice. Then you'll know. And at first it seems like there's a bit of a disconnect between practical life on one hand and sort of spiritual on the other. But eventually, when you're in the present moment, walking the dog, when you're in the present moment, speaking to your wife, when you're in the present moment, playing with the kids or helping with the homework or putting them to bed, or when you're in the present moment, speaking to your client on the phone or in front of your computer, when you actually practice that attention in the moment, and when you redirect your mind, if it's thinking negative thoughts, when you practice that again and again and again, you will find that the so-called spiritual on the one hand and the practical on the other come together as one. And there is just present moment and the actions that you're performing and the roles that you're playing. Either it's dad or husband or friend or walking the dog or whatever it is. They're just roles that you're picking up and putting down, and you yourself remains constant. And you can be calm, you can be effective, you're happier, you're more energetic, you're livelier, you're more creative. This is what conscious confidence is all about. So it's balancing those two. Keep on with the practices, but I would strongly suggest really during the day, don't just leave those practices for the early morning. Bring your attention into the present moment with what you're doing every day in your tasks, and you will find that so-called disconnect becomes one. And you may need to have reminders, like put a post-it on your computer, come into the present moment, some statement that reminds you. Wear a wristband. I've found post-it notes very handy personally. Put a reminder on your phone so you have an alert to remind you to come into the present moment. And it's just a matter of practice. It's a muscle and it needs practicing. And if you make that decision, the decision is the key point. The choice, the decision is the key point. And then it's just a matter of practice. And sure, there'll be some days that are better than others, but that doesn't matter. It's the practice that's the key. So I hope that's helpful. And then another question, and it's a sort of similar thing. This is from another person. How can spirituality in normal life not be weird? We talk about this woo-woo spirituality. Well, it actually relates back to what I was talking about. It can seem weird at first because you've got your normal daily life. And quite frankly, our normal daily life is often clouded with a whole lot of habit, when we're largely unconscious for it. And then we have this sort of spirituality, which is where we sort of go somewhere else and have all these lovely experiences and practice these things. And the idea is to bring it all into an integrated whole in the present moment. And the present moment is the key. It's where we can be awake and aware, raise our self-awareness, and that's where the practical becomes spiritual, and the spiritual becomes practical, because it needs to be practical in the present moment. That's where it's tested. That's where you really know. That's where the rubber hits the road. You can have all these lovely spiritual experiences, and anybody can be calm and peaceful sitting on a mountain or in a room locked away. But when the kids need something, or they're upset, or they've hurt their foot and they need attending to, or your partner needs a hug, or you've got a difficult situation to deal with at work, you need to be in the present moment. And that is an incredibly spiritual moment if you actually bring your attention and your practices and your presence and your whole self to what you're doing in the present moment. So that's where the spiritual becomes practical, very important, and the practical can be elevated to the spiritual, if you want to call it that. But it all happens in the present moment, and it's about being awake and aware and actually practicing these things. And that starts with a resolution to practice. It's the decision that's the key, the resolve to do it. So I hope that was helpful. Well, there's tons more questions, and we'll get to them in future shows. I've got the mailbag, so do email me. Go to my website. My email's on the website at info@consciousconfidence.com. Send me an email, drop me a line, or on social media, post a question on my page on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So ask me anything. I love the questions. So if you want to know more about conscious confidence, you want to discover more, find out more, go to my website, consciousconfidence.com. There's tons of information there, tons and tons, loads of it. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and I also have a YouTube channel. So there's plenty of information there. There's plenty of links to articles and things. And also on my website, there's a link to more podcasts and radio shows. There's links to magazine articles and media that you might be interested in. And I've written a book, Conscious Confidence, Use the Wisdom of Sanskrit to Find Clarity and Success. And you can get my book on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble, or on my website, consciousconfidence.com. That's where you can get my book. The book's in paperback, ebook, and audio book. So there's plenty of formats to suit everyone. And there's lots on the website. That is a good go-to place. And I've also got a blog on the website, so there's more information there. Oops, and I've just lost my earpiece. And do drop me a line and ask me any questions. I love to see my mailbag filling up with tons of questions. So next show, we're going to be talking about coming out from under the fear shadow, and especially stepping free of your comfort zone and some of the challenges that you may meet along the way in coming out from under the fear shadow. So that's in the next show. So mark that in your calendar and join me to listen about coming out from under the fear shadow. And remember, the wisdom traditions have your back. They know who you are in truth. You are whole, pure, perfect, and complete. And they know you're enough, and they know you are limitless and universal. So follow the wisdom traditions and follow the wisdom in Sanskrit. It'll never lead you astray. And so finishing off on the theme of speech, I went to the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, and there's a beautiful discipline for speech. And this is a way of checking your speech. And it says, the austerity for speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also regularly reciting the words of the wise. Excuse me. So that's what the Gita says about speech. Truth that's truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others. In Sanskrit it says, Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat swadhyaya vyasanam chaiva vangmayam tapa uchyate. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Confidence with Sarah Main. Join us next month on Transformation Talk Radio for more timeless wisdom with Sarah's exciting and innovative approach to living. Discover more joy, freedom, and step into your limitless potential. For more information on Sarah Main and her work, or to listen to past shows, visit sarahmain.com.